Hey guys, so it's confession cam time here on our Centered Cam vlog, and here it is. Last week at Centered we were talking about trials, and James says in James chapter 1 we're supposed to rejoice in trials. And so here's the irony of the situation. I was putting together this really great video with blue screen behind me and special effects and graphics, and I had this polished message for you that I prepared to summarize what we had talked about last week and to talk about what we were going to have coming up at Centered in the coming weeks. And my computer kept crashing. It didn't really crash, it just won't handle the video. Or something, right? So it's really frustrating, when you have computer problems, right? And it just won't work. And maybe you've got an assignment due, or you've got something else going on. It's like, no, not now, and oh God, why am I facing this trial? I'm not alone in this, am I? It seems like such a dumb thing, because there are people in this world who are facing such larger trials than a computer problem. Whether it's illness or the death of a loved one, or unemployment, or whatever other stresses in their lives that they have to face at this time. And I find myself facing this small little trial and then getting frustrated with that, just wanting to take this computer and just, because then the anger, the frustration gives way to sin when we give into those desires, James says later on, and that's what we're going to talk about this week. Last week we started talking about suffering as we opened up this series in James, and there are some big major themes we're looking at. We're looking at suffering as Christians, as we develop spiritual maturity. James is talking about. We're talking about suffering. We're talking about serving others. We're talking about speaking with care. We're talking about submitting to God and to others. And we're talking about sharing with others. So these are the big themes. And then there's smaller themes within those categories. So like last week, we talked about suffering. And the first thing was we rejoice in our trials. Well, how can we rejoice in our trials? I find it hard to even find joy in my little computer problem, let alone bigger trials than that. Well, it's all about attitude, right? That's what we talked about last week. It's all about attitude, and we can have that joyful attitude because there are advantages. And there are two advantages, and the first one is this. It develops perseverance in us. Facing trials with joy develops perseverance. And perseverance is staying power in our relationship with Christ and with others. And it also develops spiritual maturity. It brings us to completion, James says. Now, we'll never get there in this life, but we need to strive. We need to keep moving forward, and we need to keep developing these Christian characteristics that James talks about on this path to spiritual maturity. So it's about attitude, because there are advantages. And how can I do this on my own? Well, there's assistance. And James in chapter 1, he talks about asking for wisdom. And there are 3 prerequisites to asking for wisdom. And the first one is we need to have faith. Well, of course we need to have faith. We need to have faith in God, that he is who he says he is, and that he's going to do what he says he's going to do. And if he says he'll give us wisdom, we have to have faith that he will give us wisdom, but there's more. We have to be joyful in our low position. Or if we're rich in this world, we need to take joy and celebrate in our low position. Well, how does that make sense? Well, because our hope is eternal. God has bigger things planned out for us in eternity. And so we need to live with an eternal perspective regardless of how well off or how poor we are in this world. So the first thing is, for wisdom, we ask for it with faith. The second thing is we ask for it with hope. Hope that comes from our eternal perspective. And the third thing is that we ask for it with love. Love of God. So that's the way to wisdom. And we need that wisdom to recognize the advantages of persevering under trial so that we can be joyful, so that we can have that attitude of rejoicing under trial. So that's last week. This week we're moving from the trials that push in on us from the outsides to the temptations that stem from our own desires from the inside. Like when I have my computer problem, and that turns into anger that comes from the inside. And where we rejoice in trial, when it comes to temptations, we resist temptations. So this week we're going to look at the source of temptation. We're going to look at the steps to temptation. And we're going to look at the solution for temptation. And along this path to spiritual maturity that the whole book of James is about, we're going to be talking more and more about character. Remember, we're not talking about too much theology. For James, most of that's a given. See, our theology determines how we live. What we believe about God determines our lifestyle, how we live. But more than that, how we love God, determines and shapes our character. So we're going to be talking a lot more about what it means to love God and how that looks in our Christian life on this path to spiritual maturity. Alright? So this video is probably better than something polished with special effects anyway, right? In the end, and we can rejoice in that. So I'm looking forward to continuing this study with you. I'm learning from it, and I hope you're getting something out of it as well. And I hope you're looking forward to continuing to dig into the Word this Sunday. I'll see you guys this Sunday evening at Centered.